Picture a quiet Tuesday morning just outside your back window. The cool, dew-heavy air clings to the grass and the early sun casts long, fractured shadows across the patio stones. You walk out with a small scoop of mixed seeds, your fingers brushing the rough texture of the feed before you scatter it across the wooden tray. To you, it's just a clean, quiet act of charity. A gentle handshake extended to the wild world. A moment later, a flash of iridescent feathers drops from the canopy above. The bird lands with a soft thump on the cedar edge, its head snapping left and right in rapid, jerky arcs. It lowers its beak, scoops a seed, and swallows in a single motion. You smile, sip your coffee, and step back inside, leaving the scene to its peaceful morning rhythm. What you can't hear, though, is the high-frequency click of a biological switch being flipped in the trees above your house. Within minutes, that single visitor multiplies. Shadows dart across the grass with a strange, unnatural urgency. By tomorrow, that simple morning gesture won't be an act of support anymore. It will have initiated a profound, irreversible rewiring of the local ecosystem right outside your window, turning your quiet backyard into a silent arena of ecological dependence. Most people believe that feeding backyard birds is a pure, unblemished good. We assume tossing out sunflower seeds or hanging a suet block is like leaving a bowl of water on a hot sidewalk, a straightforward lifeline with zero downside. We think we're rescuing struggling creatures from the harsh realities of concrete expansion and seasonal scarcity, bridging the gap between human comfort and wild survival. Yet, what most people don't realize is that nature doesn't operate on charity. It operates on equilibrium. When you anchor a localized, high-calorie, infinite food source 6 feet from your kitchen glass, you aren't just helping an animal eat. You are fundamentally dismantling the ancient algorithms of survival that keep a species sharp, resilient, and wild. In a pristine natural habitat, a bird's day is an exhausting masterclass calculation of energy expenditure versus caloric reward. They have to scour acres of forest, decode the hidden patterns of insect life, dodge unseen predators, and compete within a brutal, balanced hierarchy. But when you provide a stationary, bottomless bowl of food right on your patio, you instantly collapse that vast evolutionary landscape into a tiny, effortless zone. Wait, what actually happens to an animal's mind when the daily struggle for survival is quietly swapped out for a human-controlled vending machine? It's a slow, invisible slide into biological amnesia. And it happens in total secrecy, right above your lawn, while you're inside washing your breakfast dishes. Here's what most people don't realize. This matters more than you can possibly imagine. Right now, millions of homeowners take part in this little daily routine, completely blind to the psychological erosion happening inside the tiny brains of their regular visitors. The most unsettling part is this illusion of thriving health. You look out the window. You see 20 birds clustered around the feeder, and your brain just assumes it's a healthy community. But beneath that pretty surface, a silent transformation is taking root. You're accidentally teaching wild animals to unlearn their own instincts, swapping the sharp edge of independence for the soft, vulnerable haze of total addiction. By the end of this, I promise you will never look at your backyard feeder the same way again. You'll see the hidden architecture of wildlife behavior, the real cost of artificial abundance, and why your morning routine carries such a heavy, invisible price tag for the creatures you love. On day one, the local ecosystem looked completely normal. A handful of resident finches and chickadees claimed the tray. Their movements were cautious, a bit erratic, and totally dialed into their surroundings. They'd land, grab a seed, and immediately dart back into the thick, protective cover of the juniper hedge just to crack it open safely. This is just the standard rhythm of the wild. Cover equals safety. Exposure equals death. But by day 7, something fundamentally shifted in the geometry of the yard. The birds just stopped flying back to the juniper hedge. Why waste precious energy commuting to cover when the food source never runs out and the human house is quiet? Instead, they started lingering right on the feeder tray, shoulder to shoulder, completely losing that sharp, hyper-vigilant edge that keeps wild animals alive. The space around the feeder turned into an avian highway. The air got thick with the dry, papery rustle of wings beating against the morning air, broken up by sharp, territorial warning clicks. Then a dominant scrub jay showed up, and the smaller chickadees vanished, not because they flew away, but because they were already surrendering their natural foraging spots entirely. You watch this from your kitchen window and think it's just normal bird activity. But here's the thing people miss. You've accidentally set up an artificial monopoly. In ecology, when you concentrate the food, you concentrate the power. The birds that figured out your schedule first basically formed a little territorial mafia, deciding who gets to eat, who waits, and who starves. By day 14, you could actually see that psychological dependency taking over their daily habits. Wild animals are supposed to be nomadic. They move around every single day so they don't overexhaust local seed banks or bug populations. But our test subjects? They just anchored themselves right there. They stopped exploring the woods around them. Their home ranges, which really should span miles of complex forest, shrink down to a tiny radius of just a few hundred feet, locked entirely onto your patio. They weren't wild foragers anymore. They were basically residents living in an artificial commune, and honestly, the biological cost of all that convenience is pretty steep. When a bird relies entirely on high-fat, high-carb seeds handed out by humans, its body starts adapting to the surplus. Fat stores pile up fast. Their liver and digestive system adjust to a diet that's way richer and a lot less diverse than anything they'd get by scouring a forest floor or hunting fast-moving insects. Even worse, the problem-solving parts of their brains started to atrophy. Think about it. In the wild, finding food takes spatial memory, pattern recognition, and actual physical dexterity, peeling back bark, cracking hard shells, digging through frozen dirt. But around an infinite feeder, all those complex cognitive loops just go quiet. The bird doesn't need to solve anything anymore. It just waits for the glass door to click open. By day 21, the invisible boundaries of this backyard ecosystem started bleeding outward, revealing just how terrifyingly fragile the whole setup really was. A dense group of distracted, easy-to-reach songbirds doesn't stay hidden from the apex predators on the edge of the suburbs. On a quiet Thursday afternoon, the frantic, high-pitched alarm calls of a dozen goldfinches suddenly pierced the air. It's that sharp, urgent sound that instantly jerks your head up from your desk. A shadow plummeted from the upper branches of the oak tree. A Cooper's hawk, moving with lethal, calculated precision, clipped the edge of the feeder tray, missing a startled finch by a fraction of an inch before banking hard into the fence line. And here's the hidden shadow of backyard feeding. You aren't just feeding songbirds. You're creating a localized predator magnet. By concentrating prey animals into a predictable, stationary location, you turn your patio into an open-air hunting preserve. The hawk didn't just happen to fly through your yard by chance. It learned the schedule. It mapped the vulnerability of the artificial ecosystem you built. Worse still, look at what was happening to their innate survival skills. When the hawk vanished back into the tree line, the finches didn't disperse into the deep forest cover like ancestral instinct demanded. They just fluttered a few feet away onto the patio chairs, chirping nervously, waiting for the threat to pass so they could return to the exact same spot of vulnerability. Their fear response had been dulled by the overwhelming pull of the calorie fountain. By day 28, the experiment reached its psychological climax. The birds no longer viewed the yard as nature. They viewed it as a human-controlled vending machine. They lost their fear of human proximity. They sat on the patio furniture waiting for the morning door handle to turn. All their ancient survival instincts, the wariness, the scouting flights, the nomadic drive, had been systematically traded away for the guaranteed calorie hit of a sunflower seed. And then, just like that, the experiment ended. On day 29, the feeder was left empty. What happened next was honestly chilling a real window into how fragile artificial dependence can be. Within hours, the morning silence in the yard felt heavy and surreal. By noon, a frantic cloud of dozens of birds descended on the empty tray. They were scratching at the bare wood, pecking at imaginary dust, just refusing to leave. They didn't scatter to find natural food. Honestly, they had forgotten how. They just lingered in the freezing air, wasting precious energy staring at an empty plastic port that had failed them for the very first time in a month. They had traded their wildness for our convenience. And as you stand there at your kitchen window watching those frantic shadows linger over the patio, it kind of hits you hard, almost like a physical blow. We always think our interactions with nature are harmless because our intentions are pure. We just want to help. We want to connect. We want to see bright wings flashing against the dull gray of an urban morning. Here's what most people don't realize, though. Nature doesn't care about our intentions. It only responds to our interventions. That feeder in your yard? It's not a bridge to the wild. It's an artificial fulcrum, tilting the balance of survival, rewriting the instincts of local wildlife, and binding them to a human schedule they can't even comprehend. When you pour seed onto that tray, you aren't just feeding a bird. You're pulling a thread in a vast ancient ecological tapestry, just hoping the whole thing doesn't unravel. So maybe you step back up to your back window tomorrow morning. Look at the trees, the lawn, the quiet spaces between the houses. Realize that every human action leaves an invisible footprint. And sometimes, the kindest thing we can do for the wild world is simply to step back, let them forage on their own terms, and leave nature to its own magnificent devices. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but have you ever seen how wildlife around your home changes when you alter your outdoor habits? And honestly, what did it teach you about the delicate balance just outside your glass?